Andrew Doyle, welcome to Divided. Thank you for being with us. You're a writer, you're a comedian. Would it also be fair to say you're something of a provocateur these days?
Well, a provocateur would imply that I'm deliberately trying to upset people or annoy people, which is never my intention at all. It just so happens that some of the opinions I've come out with tend to provoke, and I'm not sure why that is, but it isn't deliberate. I'm just saying what I think.
So if the intention is not necessarily to provoke, what is the intention of your work?
I think it comes down to the distinction between comedy and satire. You know, I'm really fond of W.H. Auden's view of satire, which is that it's essentially angry but optimistic, because it believes it can change the world, right? It believes that there's something wrong with the current system, and it pokes at it in order to change. Whereas comedy is more kind of just resigned. It's pessimistic because it's resigned that we live in this absurd, awful world, so we may as well just laugh at it.
But you would be happy if things changed as a result of what you do?
Of course, but I'm not delusional enough to think I've got that kind of clout.
Who might have that sort of clout? Someone perhaps like Titania McGrath. I mean, this is your latest creation. For those who haven't spent any time on social media recently and don't know who she is, tell me a little bit about her.
Yeah, I've always got to remind myself that a lot of people are not on Twitter. She's what you'd call a kind of fourth wave feminist, which is an intersectional feminist. And that's the form of feminism which likes to take into account every aspect of one's oppression. So your race, gender, sexuality, all that kind of thing. And it sort of maps it on a kind of, I suppose, a kind of chart of oppression. That's the way intersectionality works. She's the kind of recognisable figure, the kind of very po-faced, humourless, judgmental, very posh. You know, she lives in Kensington. She's got another house in the Cotswolds. Daddy pays for everything, you know. But she's determined to tell the world how oppressed she is. She loves writing about her victimhood status, you know, with no self-awareness at all. It's specifically not a parody of someone, because I didn't want to do that. I wanted to be a certain type of person. But I read a lot of the books by, I suppose, what you would say left-leaning commentators and columnists who fit this category. I wouldn't like to name them. That's a bit mean, I think. But I think we all know who I'm talking about. And it's people who write books about millionaires, independently wealthy people who were privately educated, had everything handed on a plate, and they write books about what victims they are. And to me, that's just funny. I just think that's really funny, and it's worth holding a mirror up to that. You know, that's all I'm doing there.
So much of the character of Titania revolves around the concept of being woke.
Right.
Again, for those who have not spent any amount of time in this world, what does it mean? Because some wear it as a badge of honour. Some actually accept it as a definition of themselves.
It's odd. I mean, woke has started to be used unironically now, more and more, whereas for a while there it wasn't. The idea of being woke is being very aware of social justice issues, very aware of inclusivity, diversity, the idea of being very sensitive to people's feelings and not offending anyone. So all of this is obviously good. It's a well-intentioned thing. This is social justice should be something that we're all celebrating. But the problem is the way in which it's been done by this very small minority of people who've taken it a step too far, I suppose.
In what way? That they're overly censorious? That they leap to conclusions? What?
Well, there's a number of things. They're impervious to debate, so they're not up for debating any issues. Their way is the right way. They've got this incredible narcissistic certainty that they never doubt themselves, you know, which I find funny. I find that really funny, but also a little bit dangerous. They want to police speech. They want to stop you saying certain words. They believe in this utopian world where if only they could control the way people speak and the way people think, they could solve all of the world's problems. It's completely delusional. You must have noticed, so if there's a certain type of person, a certain contingent of people, I don't for a second doubt that they think that they're doing the right thing, that the woke ideology they think is a good, purifying thing. But that's the problem with a cult, and it is a kind of cult, is that they don't see the damage they're doing and the harm they're creating.
Well, let's take a look at some of the work of Ms McGrath. It's never OK for men to give CPR to an unconscious woman. Resuscitation is just a fancy word for rape. Now, I'm not the most clued up on all of these issues, but you're going to have to take me through, I think, a number of steps to tell me what is being satirised here. OK,
fine. So that is a tweet that was a response to a particular article, and what it is about the idea that is kind of intrinsic in fourth wave feminism now. It's going back to this old sort of Victorian view of men as essentially rapacious, sort of violent beings, and women as these sort of sort of damsels in distress.
What, linked to, you know, things like rape culture?
Yeah, exactly. So the rape culture idea, for instance, is predicated on this notion that we live in a culture that normalizes or approves of rape, which isn't true. You know, we live in a culture where actually no civilized person approves of rape, and so therefore I wanted to address that. Now, obviously, I'm aware that this is a sensitive issue. She goes into those areas because she's got that certainty about herself, and she doesn't mind saying these things that seem outrageous to us. And of course, nobody says what she just said. That is a huge exaggeration. And what I'm often doing is taking an absurd idea, which is real in the real world, and taking it to its extremes, because that's how it's funny. If I just simply replicated exactly what was being said, then it probably wouldn't work as well.
Do you think people get the joke in that sense? Then do you think that the women who speak in those terms, but not to that extent, understood what you were trying to do there? Or do you think they thought, well, you're just having a pop, aren't you?
But who am I having a pop at? That's interesting. I mean, who's the victim in that joke, really? Because it's not mocking rape victims by any means. I just wouldn't do that. It's talking about the heightened sensitivities that we now have about relations between men and women, to the extent that somebody might be reticent to even save someone's life because of the notion of consent, because the notion has been so sort of misinterpreted in the discourse. So that's the target. It certainly isn't someone who's been the victim of sexual assault.
Let's have a look at another of Titania's tweets, and this deals with the white saviour story that has come up recently, of course, with Stacey Doyle taking a trip for comic relief. Next month, I'll be touring the deprived areas of Africa to teach poor black people about intersectionality and the problem with white saviours. I mean, didn't David Lammy have a bit of a point when it came to Stacey Doyle?
I mean, David Lammy, the point where I think he did have a point was probably that he's talking about the idea that countries that are, I suppose, the poorer countries, the developing countries, should be encouraged to, I suppose, fend for themselves, be able to build up their own economy, look after themselves, OK? But where I feel he went wrong is he could only see it through the prism of skin colour. What he was really attacking was Stacey Dooley's skin colour. He was saying it's bad optics. That's what he was saying. He's saying it's not good for a white face to be seen amongst a group of poor black people.
Can't you see any of the argument for it looking just a little bit colonial? This rich white person comes to Africa and says, I'm here to help.
Do you really think her intention was colonial? I mean, surely...
No, it's nothing to do with intent. It's, as you say, it's the optic.
I think it's everything to do with intent, but that's why I'm criticising, because I think that's not enough. I mean, also, is David Lammy really in a position to speak on behalf of poor Ugandans or anyone? You know, is he just because of the colour of his skin?
Well, you're essentially arguing there that the only people who could speak on behalf of poor Ugandans are poor Ugandans.
That's exactly what I'm arguing, yeah. I think someone who is starving and destitute isn't going to turn away someone with some food if they've got a white face. They don't care about this stuff. And you might say that, well, going out there in charity and aid work, it's not really doing something in the broad term. It's helping those individual people. It's a good thing. And actually, I think intention's really important. I mean, Stacey Dooley giving up her time, lending her profile to something that is a good cause. Is it really helpful to be criticising charities and people who do these really good things? And again, with Lammy, I'm sure the intention is good, right? I've no doubt. I don't think he's doing anything malevolent in any way. But there you have the problem, because you generate a lot of resentment about something which is, actually a good thing.
Isn't satire always meant to punch up?
Yeah.
It strikes me that a lot of the time her targets are, marginalised groups.
But that's not the case. I mean, I think you're entitled to that misinterpretation, but I don't think she is punching down. It's not the vulnerable groups. It's not gay people or trans
people who are trying to look after those groups.
It's the paternalistic, very privileged people who are saying, I will speak on behalf of all of these people, and that's the target. But also, I mean, I think with comedy you can punch down, you can punch in all sorts of directions, right? Because that's the nature of humour. Sometimes cruelty can be funny. When I'm writing comedy or satire, I don't punch down. I think when I'm attacking woke culture, I'm very much punching up. And the reason I say that is because it is, for a start, it's a very small minority of people, but they're very vocal and very powerful, and it infects everything. It affects television, the media, journalism. I want to explore that a little bit further in just a second, but another character that you were involved in the creation of, Jonathan Pye, the newsman that many newsmen wish they could be on occasion. I just want to take a look at a clip, and this is all to do with that case in Scotland. Count Dankula, an online poster who taught his dog to do a Nazi salute. Let's just take a quick look.
It's a cute little pug dog reacting to one of the worst things you could ever say. That's the point. It's a joke, you Where are the artists, the writers? Where are the comedians? Where are they? Why are they not up in arms? You've got Ricky Gervais, David Baddiel, a handful of others. That's it, basically. Everyone else is a coward.
Of course it's a character. Of course it's an exaggeration. But contained therein, I'm assuming, quite a lot of your own personal views about the Count Dankula Pug case.
In that case, absolutely. There's a lot of things I've written for Jonathan Pike which I don't necessarily fully agree with because he's a character who isn't me. I think it's fair to... I think your point is fair, that in that case, yes, I would say that I broadly speaking, agree with what the character's saying.
I mean, there are a lot of people who point to the fact, as Jonathan Pye did, that actually the people who seem to be claiming the high ground, the moral high ground on the absolutist free speech argument are figures from the right, and in fact the far right, really.
Yeah. I mean, it's a real problem, actually.
Does that not concern you? Does that not make you think twice about whether or not you are correct in your approach, that you are essentially being allied with Tommy Robinson on this issue?
What concerns me is that the far right is steadily rising. That concerns me. I mean, 4 of the last 18 terror plots that have been foiled by the intelligence services have come from the far right. So it's something that it's still very much fringe. It's still a very small minority, but they are growing and I think largely that's because of the kind of conditions we are creating. And I think identity politics is at the heart of this, because if you think about the way identity politics work, the far right is an identitarian movement. The far left, similarly, they have a lot in common because they just see people through the lens of race, gender, sexuality, that neither agree with free speech. Not really. I mean, the far right is no friend of free speech, right? And I think it's a really bad situation that we've developed where we're enabling the far right to hold on to the free speech mantle, to say, we're the ones who are defending free speech. Well, they don't believe in free speech.
There wasn't an overwhelming outpouring of support from the comedic community.
No, and I understand that because of I suppose because Tommy Robinson had been so vocal in his defence of Count Dankula, but therein lies the problem, doesn't it? Tommy Robinson organised the Day for Freedom, which was ostensibly a free speech rally in London. And of course, as a result of that, you didn't have many, there were some, but you didn't have many left-wing activists attending that march, because it becomes tribal. Because all of a sudden people associate free speech with the far right. That's really a terrible situation to be in, and we need more people from all sides of the political spectrum to stand up for the notion of free speech.
Has the left wing lost its sense of humour?
There's this assumption, isn't there, that jokes and comedy and poking fun can have a kind of damaging societal effect. I think when you look at what we would call the woke comedy movement, which is now pretty much establishment, that is the establishment now, their belief is that comedy needs to be more responsible. I think there's something very patronising in this approach, because it entails 2 core beliefs that I just don't hold any truck with. The first is that minority groups in an audience need to be protected. We need to protect them from hearing jokes that could relate to their particular circumstances. Now, I don't want to sit in an audience and be told that I can't hear a joke about gay people because it might upset me. I don't want to be patronised like that. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is this belief that basically the masses aren't there to be entertained, they're to be educated. You know, and it's the comedian's responsibility to say jokes that are not ambiguous in any way, that can't be misinterpreted. Well, why? Why do you have such a degraded view of humanity that you think people don't get a joke? They do. Virtually everyone understands the difference between a joke and real life. So I think if somebody takes offence because of something I've said and I did not intend to offend them, that's their problem, because that's called life, right? There's literally nothing I could talk about that won't offend somebody at some point. But if I deliberately go out my way and I think I'm going to upset that person, or I'm going to upset that group, and I'll do a joke that isn't particularly funny, but just goes after them, my conscience wouldn't allow me to do that. My intent is clear, but also we live in a world where people will misinterpret what you say, no matter what you say, and that's just part of being a human being, I guess.
What do we lose if we lose this, the access to the freedom of speech that you espouse?
It's the fundamental bedrock of a civilised society, is that people can say whatever they want and think whatever they want to think without the state trying to prevent them from doing so. I understand why people say certain forms of speech should be off limits, because as I say, it's well-intentioned. But there is this belief in this utopian belief that if we just get people to say the right words, everything will be fixed. It won't. Humanity's a messy business, and the price you pay for freedom is some awful people are going to say some awful things, and the best way to deal with that is to mock those people, to argue against those people, to stand up and say, no, you're wrong, and this is why.